I'm reacting to Gen Z's hot takes on modern problems by Sav Seds. I think she might be a little bit more right-leaning. So let's see how she conducts these short interviews and if she's able to do it in a neutral point of view.
What do you guys think is the biggest issue facing the United States today? Just off the top of your head, what do you think is one of the biggest things?
Honestly, I think mental health is a big one. Mental health in relation to institutionalized issues, or is that the right word? Like,
what do you guys think? What do you guys think is like the biggest issue right now in America? I think the biggest problems usually don't get the media coverage that it usually deserves, such as, for example, a possible looming World War III, a recession that they don't classify as a recession that's going on right now. I think there's a lot of problems that we think are problems that once you step out of kind of like that American bubble, you'll find that a lot of our problems, aren't real, right? It's just maybe like a lot of like the gender stuff that's going on. We don't always want to compare problems across the world, but I would argue that something like gender may not be as serious of an issue as, let's say, war, right?
Cultural injustice. I think there's just a lot of like miscommunication between the government and our generation specifically. I feel like they just don't feel represented enough. Okay, an example I can think of is in one of my psych classes. Like a big part of how we learn and like interpret information comes from our cultural backgrounds, and I just feel like across America there's so many different cultural backgrounds. Like people call America like the mixing pot or the melting pot. So I just feel like a lot of people feel underrepresented in the government because they don't feel like their cultural background is represented.
That's an interesting point. I don't know if I completely agree with it, but there is, something that usually isn't talked about are, I guess, maybe the downsides of diversity, right? Obviously, I'm for diversity. I think, I've always had friends from multiple different backgrounds, and I love culture and I love exploring all that. But I guess like the downside of a multicultural society is that, a lot of more problems exist, right? For example, my background is Japan, which is a very homogenous society. The reason why a lot of these like maybe socialist practices are able to work, such as like free healthcare, and in of a sense, it's like a very successful social democracy. Obviously, downsides to a homogenous society as well, but I think in terms of unity, it's probably easier to have when everybody looks the same. This doesn't mean that I'm advocating for it, but I think these are some downsides of diversity that people don't really like to talk about.
I think it's a lack of empathy and tolerance, and not understanding people's points of views and other people's struggles.
Well, with the tolerance and inclusivity issue, talk to me a little bit more about that. Why do you think that's such a big issue?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what her like actual background is, but you could definitely tell she's like a very poised and calm interviewer, right? Obviously, asking the questions in a respectful way. And I feel like the interviews based on the first minute that I've seen so far seem like they're being heard, and that, she's not trying to like get him and, trap him in like a specific response.
Give me some examples of what's been happening.
Everyone's always discriminated based off of their race, classism, many things, and then we don't discuss it enough. And then if it is discussed, it's only slightly partly in the news, and then it goes away. Like a lot of issues right now is environmentalism and how we're not going to be able to go back to what we had before because of pollution, and not enough is being done. But again, it's always individualized. It's always like, oh, the regular people have to be recycling, they have to be doing all this, and then we're not focusing on corporations and how they are polluting and stuff like that.
How many years do you think the world has left if we don't get climate change under control?
I think it said 7 or 6 years left.
6 years.
Something around that. I'm not positive. Don't quote me on that.
Okay, come on. If she actually believed that it was like 6 years, do you think she'd be in college right now? Like, come on. If you had 6 years to live, you would probably not be wasting your time in college. I wouldn't be.
But I think it's around that, yeah.
Do you think it's 6 years? Do you think that's kind of extreme, or do you think that we're really on that track right now?
I think we're really on that track. I think
6 years and we're done.
Yeah, I don't think there's much left.
I think we've lost kind of a lot of community or sense of community. I think social media is an issue, kind of, and it's, I don't know.
I hate that, man. Like every time people just point to like social media as just like this blanket problem for everything. Look, I mean, maybe I'm biased because I make content online, but I feel like social media has done more good than bad. It's created definitely a whole economy of jobs in a way, right? As well as maybe even a different avenue of marketing, right? With everybody kind of utilizing these mediums, right? Maybe like the marketing dollars that used to go into mainstream media is now going to these platforms. Like, Yes, of course, a lot of it can come with like the highly addictive nature of it. But if you're actually utilizing social media to like your benefit and creating and instead of just consuming, like, I don't know. I feel like social media has created a lot more net positive, right? Like I met my girlfriend through social media. And I'm sure like a lot of my even online, friends that I have in real life now all started through online connections as well. So, yeah.
know, I feel like I can't really speak on like the biggest issue in America because there are a lot of really big issues. I don't think social media can be said to be the biggest issue.
It seems very polarized and everything seems politicized. And then there's the whole culture thing.
Yeah, so again, like the title of this video is like hot takes on modern day problems. Yeah, I think it definitely encapsulates that, right? It would be very interesting to, ask these exact same questions in a different country, maybe a third world or underdeveloped country, right? How different their problems would be. In a way, it's a privilege that our problems get to be social media, that our problems get to be what pronouns to use. That in a way shows how good of a place that we are relative to other countries because, man, let me tell you, probably countries like Chad in Africa probably don't even know that these problems even exist.
So it's hard to be able to learn from like this fast-paced quote-unquote wokeness that Gen Z is trying to like add into society, I guess.
You know what? So cancel culture has been an issue that has come up a lot from Gen Z. I've noticed this lately because I go to college campuses all over the nation. Are you guys concerned with where cancel culture is right now? Do you think it's an issue?
I mean, I think it can be kind of an issue because I think everyone can be very quick to cancel before they know all of the facts and then kind
And then the thing too is that anyone, like literally any individual can be canceled for something that they've said or thought in the past, right? I definitely could be. I mean, maybe even the controversial nature of the topics that I research and make videos about can put me at risk for cancellations. Yeah, and then, this also happens too. I obviously conduct a lot of street interviews where sometimes after the fact they ask me to delete the interview footage that we had. Right. So even though they felt very comfortable, I obviously explained the ethos of the channel, what exactly I'm going to be talking about. And obviously I lead them through the questions and they feel very comfortable. But let's say a day or week later, they see a short form content about them and they want to delete it. And I get it from their perspective. Right. But it's a sad state in the world that we're in right now that even if you share your real unfiltered opinions, you can get canceled for that. Even if you do it with nuance and with respect, you can have this fear that cancel culture is going to come after you. Where, let's be real, that cancel culture mob isn't really coming after like the accountant that lives in Austin, Texas, right? They're trying to go after, cancel culture only exists because of the power trip that happens, right? Cancel culture is wanting to take the people that are perceived as higher status as them because cancel culture derives a lot of power and thrill from it, right? So as regular people, we need to realize that, look, cancel culture stops once regular people stop giving a fuck about cancel culture, right?
But then I think it also can be a good thing in that we're not just like letting everything slide. So, I don't know.
Give me an example of when cancel culture has been a good thing.
Just like calling people out if they say something that's racist or like a microaggression or something.
I'm a little bit older. I don't mean to cut you off. What is a microaggression?
Just like little, usually racist comments on like, they happen like every day. Like,
but in that definition though, right, she could be canceled for that. Like a microaggression can be perceived by, I guess, the victim in that case. So if anything can be perceived as that, does that mean that any little statement like saying that I like Japanese food or saying that I like Mexican food, would that be a cultural appropriation or some microaggression? Like, look, anything can be canceled at that point.
Usually they go unnoticed. Like, I don't know, a go-to for me is like, oh, you're smart because you're Asian. Like, you're not smart because you're Asian, you're smart because you're smart, and your race has nothing to do with how intelligent you are.
When you hear people tell you, like, oh, you're smart because you're Asian, how does that make you feel?
When I was younger, well, I'm half Japanese, half white, so when I was younger, I didn't feel Japanese, even though I look more Japanese, so people would tell me that, and I'm like, joke's on you, I'm white. But then it wasn't until later that I realized I was thinking that way because of the way I was being taught in school was like, white is good, like Asian American history doesn't exist. And I didn't know that until I got here, like that it's a whole field of study. And so like now when I hear that, I tell people like, you can't say that, and then explain why. And I think it's the explanation that really helps people, because then they're like, oh, I understand now. Like, I even
See, so what she's describing is good, right? Because obviously everyone is entitled to like the opinions that they have. So if she feels offended by something, instead of going like the cancel culture mob of just silencing people, what she's doing is explaining like, look, hey, that's a boundary that I have. Don't cross it. And this is why. Like, that is definitely great, right? Because everybody has their own personal boundaries. And if you outline it clearly, and if people don't respect it, then don't associate with them. But I think silencing is where cancel culture goes wrong. And it's also very lazy.
and had to explain it to my mom, because the whole model minority myth, and she didn't realize it was a myth because that's just how they grew up, and that's just what the culture was, I guess. And then I explained it to her like, oh, that's a whole myth that the dominant culture made up and stuff. And
And what is model minority? Sorry, I'm
Oh,
kind of
no,
new to
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of this terminology, so talk to me about that too.
She's a great interviewer, man. Like, you can tell, like, maybe she actually does have like a journalism like degree or something. I mean, that doesn't make you a good journalist, but you could tell by how she like asks the question, it invites the person to want to share more, right? That's what I also try to do whenever I do these interviews. I will also never wear something like a tank top. I try and wear something like very neutral, very, I guess, comforting, because if I wear something like too flashy or something like too bummy, people are making very split decisions on whether they want to talk to you, especially if you come up to them on the street, right? So what I try and do is wear very neutral clothing, and if they do agree to an interview, come at it like at a very neutral and inviting tone, right? I also try and be very cognizant of like my body language, like making sure that I like open up my body, I'm not like closed off. All these little things like definitely help in contributing and making someone you're speaking to, especially very complex and social issues, to really want to do it more. And she's doing a phenomenal job.
So I've been watching the news lately, and I've noticed that like the potential World War III or nuclear war with Russia has been a big issue. Do you know anything about that? What are your thoughts?
I'm not well versed in that, so I don't have much thoughts. No.
But to be totally honest with you, I don't feel like I have the education on it to be able to really speak to it.
I think I've heard a lot of stuff on things like TikTok and social.
Yeah, see, I guess that's kind of like the point that I was making earlier, is that what's covered in the media is a lot of these non-problems, like let's say gender or social media, or perhaps climate change that's going to happen and end in the next 6 years or something. But these immediate problems, for example, right, like BRICS, which is Brazil, I think Russia, India, China, and Saudi Arabia, which is this alliance that's been forming and growing in power. It's growing each and every day. I think 19 different countries are now applying to be a part of it. And this is like a direct counter alliance against the US. So in a lot of the ways, right, BRICS is trying to lose its dependence on the US dollar when it comes to trade, where now they're starting to use maybe like the Chinese yuan, or, you know, coming up with their own currency to do that. These types of things is going to lead to, you know, further international conflict, especially with like the war that's going on in Ukraine right now, right? And the heavy involvement that the US is under. Yeah, these are the real problems that could happen. Like, who knows? Instead of like 6-7 years of the, you know, planet ending, in 6-7 years there might be a World War III, but this is rarely talked about.
Media, so a lot of times I don't necessarily know if I'm getting accurate information or not. I wish that there was a lot more accurate information being given out, because I think a lot of the times you get, I don't know, I think they try to minimize the extent to which the problems that are going on, if that makes sense. Yeah,
that's a good point. You know, how do you expect to a lot of like people that are young, Gen Z, to know about these problems if there's no really like legitimate media coverage on it, right? And I think that's why citizen journalism is going to become more and more important. People like her, who's going on, you know, on the street and asking people and informing people and having real dialogue and conversations instead of shutting each other's opinions, that's going to become more and more important, right? But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think. What do you guys think is like the biggest modern day problem that America or the world is going to be facing today? So if you want to see more, like, comment, and subscribe, and then main channel's in the description. Thank you.